All right, let's talk about my everyday carry medical gear. So typically my everyday carry, if you want to call it that, is a tourniquet. So I have one of these in the truck, staged in whatever vehicle I'm driving. There's tourniquets. So all of our cars, trucks, everything, there's tourniquets. There's also a D-Day response kit that is set up for the vehicle. So Dan Hudnett from D-Day Response set this up for us. And it has basically trauma shears. You can see everything here if I can put it up there for you. So there's Israeli bandage or compression bandage. There is another tourniquet. There's all kinds of good stuff in here. There's acrylics, there's gauze, 4x bandages, there's a chest seal, there's a nasal passage airway device. There's all kinds of good stuff in here. There's quick clot. There's everything you would need in here to stop the bleed and manage the bleed. So that is basically what I have near me every day. Now, I don't carry stuff on me any longer like I used to. I used to carry an ankle kit. When I was on the job, I had an ankle kit on one ankle and a backup pistol on the other. And then when we went to the outside vest carriers, I switched all of my medical gear to the vest itself, as well as my backup gun. It was on the vest as well. And it just made life easier, particularly when we start looking at studies about joint injuries and wear and tear over time on guys who are carrying things on their ankles and in that area. So that was kind of when I got away from having it on my person, so to speak, I guess. Yeah, when I left the job, I guess. So 2020, I stopped having medical kit on my body, actually on me, and switched over to having it near me, so adjacent or accessible to me. So that's always in the car. So I have this from D-Day Response. That's always in the vehicles. Any vehicle I'm driving has one of these with spare tourniquets and all of that gear in there. And then when I'm on the range, I have a range bag. So I have a bag that's set up for the range, whether I'm teaching a class, taking a class, or I'm just out there training myself. I have a medical bag set up for that, which is pretty much identical to this. It's just immediate action stuff, enough to stop the bleed or manage the bleed long enough to get myself or whomever to the pros. You know, I'm not going to pretend that I am an EMT or anything like that. Yes, I've been through numerous TCCC courses, and I've done a lot of work in that area on myself. And I don't mean medical work on myself. What I mean is training. I've put the time in and practiced, and I practice applying tourniquets. Obviously, I'm not going to do it with this one. This is a real one, but we have training tourniquets around. They're usually blue, and I have those all around. So I'm doing a lot of training with the material, but I still don't consider myself to be a go-to person for that stuff. I'm not going to, if there's somebody else there more qualified, obviously I'm going to step back. I'm not going to think that it's my job. But all that to say that my medical gear and how I set it up at this point in my life is based on just holding off the worst case until we can get you to the pros, or the pros can get to us. And that's kind of what I think about. Now, when I'm out on the trail, I actually have one of these set up on my backpack. So we have this with us when we're out on a trail, hiking, whatever, you know, out in the middle of nowhere. A lot of times there's no cell service out there. There's nothing. So we're going to have to manage whatever we run into out there. Now, with that being said, what are the concerns out there? Falls, you know, that's pretty gnarly. Twisted ankles, knees, hips. I've seen a guy out on the trail who had a hip that went out. It's pretty bad. It was a fall, the result of a fall. Bites, you know, there's some gnarly critters out there. Out in the desert and in other places up in the woods. You know, you hike up into the mountains and you're going to run into some four-legged critters as well as 6- and 8-legged critters that will make you pay for invading their space. So we're looking at how do I deal with those types of things, stings, saw a really bad injury, or what would you call it, where somebody starts to blow up. They had a response, some sort of shock. I can't remember the term for it now, but it starts with an A. But they had a response to being stung, multiple stings from bees, and it tore them up. They weren't allergic to bees, but it was just, you're out there, you're hiking, you're not paying attention to where you sit down, you sit on a log, or you sit on something, or you step off the trail to take care of business, and you step right into a patch of bees or hornets or something, and they light you up. And the body doesn't like that, whether you're allergic or not. There's going to be a response. And so I've seen a couple of those where people were just, side of the face just blown out, and arm, just giant puffed up arm and leg. So having things on hand like an EpiPen or something of that nature, those are always good to have out there. So that's my kind of my medical stuff that I carry or have with me. Again, I don't carry it on my body. I'm not going to lie and be one of these guys that tells you I carry all this stuff on me, but then when you meet them in person, it's nowhere to be found. This is stuff that's always in the vehicle. And when I'm working, which at this point in my life, in the past when I was working, I had the medical gear on me. It was on my vest. But now where I work in gyms and I train people, and I always have this stuff accessible to me. It's nearby, or there's an AED, all the gear, all of this stuff, but more of it in the trauma kit right there, mat side. When I'm coaching people, teaching people, it's within, 15 feet of the mat. There's an AED and all the gear, all the medical gear you would ever possibly need to fix cuts, scrapes, bruises, and even a major bleed. So, and a heart attack, up to and including a heart attack. So that's how I look at it. What am I looking at picking up in the near future? Jill and I have discussed the need for an AED for ourselves, for the vehicle, for two things: for the range when we're out there teaching, coaching, that kind of thing, when we're training people, and also just for service to the community purposes. If I roll up on a vehicle accident, which, when was that? That was about 2 years ago. Rolled up on a vehicle crash and quickly figured out that the guy was having a stroke. So not that the AED is going to help in that situation, but it's an example of what if, what if I roll up on a guy or a gal who had a heart attack while driving, and here we are, So, or even out and about. There was a race a few years ago where within the first mile of this 5K race, a guy just face planted, having a grabber right there coming off the starting line. So another example of a time where an AED or something of that nature would have been a good idea, even if it's just nearby. So things to think about, things to consider. And that's kind of my thought process behind what I have now at this point in my life, and why I carry what I carry or don't carry what I don't carry. I think at a minimum, you would want a tourniquet. I have found that at a minimum, a tourniquet on my gear while working was a great idea. Also, Curlex definitely was a great idea. I had a guy shot through the arm into the ribs. The round was kind of sitting right in here on top of the ribs, so it just kind of skidded around his rib cage. But just being able to just put something in that to kind of slow that down, that helped a little bit. That was good. Doctors thought that was a good idea. Been on another situation where a guy put his hand through a window and on a domestic, and being able to apply, and it was right down here, just kind of cut right through there, and it was pretty gnarly. Putting a tourniquet on that, again, doctors were like, that was a good call, probably saved this guy. So those are times and places where I've had a need for the medical kit and the gear that was on me. But where I'm at now in my life, just doing a threat assessment type thing, most of my gear is centered around what I talked about. trails, hiking, out for a run, or on the range. What do I need to respond to that? And that's going to be more than what I can just carry on my body. I'm actually going to need a kit of stuff. So this, like I said, this fits pretty well. It's actually the one that goes in my backpack's a little smaller than this, but lightweight. I mean, there's nothing to it. So no reason not to have it. Check out DDA Response. Those guys have good gear. Lone Star Medics. Those guys are great. Those are my go-to folks. Trying to think, because I don't want to leave anybody out. But those two are pretty much my go-tos between DDA Response. And DDA Response has kits for cars, over-the-road, tractor-trailer, like you name it, they have built a kit for it. They also have kits for your home, which I am really thankful for. So they have kits that just check all the boxes. So reach out to Caleb or reach out to Don and Dan at D-Day and they'll get you situated. That's my gear. Hope that answered any questions about it. And if you have any questions or comments, fire away, man. I'm more than happy to interact with you guys and explain my reasoning for what I do or do not carry at this point in my life. Thanks, guys.